Growth of party system in United States and party issues. Founding Fathers. The topic of political parties is not institutionalized in the Constitution, and the delegates at the Constitutional Convention were hostile to the idea of political parties. The first President of United States, George Washington, enjoyed two terms. From 1789 to 1792 and from 1793 to 1797. The first President of United States, George Washington, was not a member of any political party. He warned against the formation of political party, fearing conflict in his farewell address. Thomas Jefferson too in his criticism said, "If I could not go to heaven but with a party, I would not go there at all." Different views on the course of development of the country was put forward, and the leaders tried to win support for their cause by getting together, leading to the establishment of political parties. First Party System, 1792 to 1824. The supporters of Washington and Hamilton adopted the label Federalist. They represented New England and Mid-Atlantic states and supported a strong national government which supported the interests of commerce and industry and close ties with Britain. John Adams, a Federalist, won the 1797 presidential election and became the second President of United States. His presidency ended after a single term following his defeat in 1800 presidential election. The beginnings of the American party system emerged in the second presidential election because voting was done on party lines. The supporters of Jefferson and Madison were referred to as anti-federalist, came to be known as the Democratic Republicans, who were dominant in the South and supported a decentralized agrarian economy and limited power to the federal government. In the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson of the Democratic Republican won the election by defeating the Federalist candidate John Adams. The Democratic Republican also had a majority in the Senate. With this success, the DR organized themselves at the state and local level, becoming the dominant political party. The Federalists refused to support the War of 1812, verged on secession, and when the war ended well, it gave a blow to the party. The Federalists, as a result, were unable to make inroads with the electorate. The Federalists in 1816 fielded Rufus King, who lost the election to the DR candidate James Monroe. The era of good feelings under James Monroe marked the end of the first party system. Therefore, in the presidential election of 1824, 5 electors were chosen by votes. Out of the 5 candidates, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote but failed to secure a majority of electoral votes. Since no candidate secured a majority, as per the 12th Amendment, the House could choose from the top three leading candidates. The House decided on John Quincy Adams as the president, and he appointed Henry Clay as Secretary of State. Second party system from 1828 to 1854. Jackson's supporters were outraged by the corrupt bargain between Adams and Clay. This backhand deal split the DR party and came to be known as the Democratic Party, and Adams' party came to be known as the National Republican Party. Andrew Jackson in the presidential election of 1828, backed by the Democrats with national reach and a popular base at the state and local level, won the election by defeating John Adams. Supporters of President Adams after the 1832 election came together and constituted the Whig Party. This marked the return of the two-party system with different names. The Democrats won the presidential election from 1828 to 1836, while the Whigs won in 1840 and 1848 with William Henry Harrison and Zachary Taylor. In this period, the Democratic Party stood for individual and state rights, supported the executive branch, and opposed the Bank of United States, high tariffs and modernizing programs, and projected itself as the party of the common man, while the Whig Party stood for supremacy of Congress, the Bank of the United States, modernization and economic protectionism. The Democrats and the Whigs adopted certain practices in the Senate. In the 1830s, members of the Democrats sat on the right of the presiding officer and the Whigs to the left. The party in majority controlled the chairmanships and the standing committees. They determined committee assignments of their members and submitted list of assignments to be approved by the Senate. The senators of the two parties did not meet regularly during sessions to coordinate policy decisions. In the 1850s, the question of slavery took center stage, and there were disagreements whether slavery should be permitted in the new territories of the West. The Whig Party held the view that the status of slavery should be decided on the basis of popular sovereignty. The Whig Party met its end when its presidential candidate, General Winfield Scott, lost the election to Franklin Pierce in 1852. Ex-Whigs joined the Know Nothing Party or the anti-slavery Republican Party. The Know Nothing was short-lived, but the Republican Party survived and put up its first candidate in 1856, John Parmento. Lost the election, but their second presidential candidate, Abraham Lincoln, won the election in 1860. The Republican Party adopted the economic policies of the Whigs, such as railroads, high tariffs, homesteads, national banks, and aid to land, grant to colleges. During this period, when either of the two parties increased their numbers in the Senate, formed a party conference, and elected their conference chair, who presided over conference meetings to discuss legislative agenda. But the chair lacked the authority to manage Senate floor business or set policy priorities. The election of 1860 marked the beginning of two major political parties. Third party system from 1854 to 1896. Since the Civil War, the Republicans dominated national politics from 1860 to 1932, controlled the Congress, and won 4 presidential elections. The Democrats were usually in the opposition and sometimes controlled the Senate or the House or both. The Republicans consisted of businessmen, shop owners, clerks, professionals, newly enfranchised African Americans based in the industrial Northeast. The Republicans stood for national expansion, free market, and colonialism. The Democrats' support came from the South, small farmers in the West, conservative pro-business Bourbon Democrats, traditional Democrats in the North, and Catholic immigrants. Post-Civil War, Democrats opposed civil rights legislation, interests of big businesses such as protective tariffs that raised prices on imported goods needed by rural people. The party favored cheap money policies and low interest rates and inflation to benefit small farmers and tradesmen. During this period, party allegiance was an important part of most American people, where party loyalty was passed from father to son, and campaigning with uniformed marching groups and torchlight parades were a part of the social life of many communities. Fourth Party System 1896 to 1932. The progressive era began after the presidential election of 1896, when the Republican candidate William McLean won the election. The Republicans dominated the political scene, but in domestic issues there was a shift emphasizing for government regulation of railroads, large corporations, role of labor unions, the need for a new banking system, racial segregation, women's suffrage, control of immigration. The Republicans secured dominance in the industrial Northeast and in border states. During this period, both parties placed more power in the hands of the conference chair. In 1913, the Democrats appointed the Senate's first party whip to assist the leader and to keep track of members' views on various measures. The leader struggled to bring unity among party members to the decision taken by the conference. The powers of the leaders became institutionalized, and this gave the leaders the power to control the agenda of the floor. Fifth Party System from 1932 to 1976. In the 1932 presidential election, the Democrat candidate Franklin D. Roosevelt won the election. The Great Depression from 1929 to 1939 was in full bloom, and measures were required to tide over the difficulties caused by it. The new president introduced the New Deal programs, which brought in federal funding for various programs and regulations to assist the union workers, minorities, immigrants, and small business owners. It also raised the minimum wage and established Social Security. President forged a broad coalition consisting of small farmers, European immigrants, Jews, African Americans, Catholics, liberals, intellectuals, and white Southerners. The Democrats was the dominant party till 1952 and controlled both houses from 1932 to mid-1990s. They positioned themselves as liberals, and the conservatives dominated the Republicans. Both parties established senatorial campaign committees to share fundraising operations and support members in close electoral campaigns. They hired staff assistants and party secretaries. They established a policy committee to develop expertise on the problems facing the country, inform the drafting of legislation, and plan legislative agendas. The policy committees enabled the Senate to counter the executive's dominance over policy development. The civil rights legislation by the Democratic President Lyndon Johnson in mid-1960s and President Nixon's Southern Strategy in 1970 led to the breaking of white segregationalist South support away from the Democrats. The Southern white voters started voting for Republican presidential candidates as well as for the state and local candidates. This came to be known as the Southern Switch. Moreover, the anti-Vietnam protesters moved over to the Republican Party. The Catholics and evangelists who were with the Democrats united with the Republicans over abortion and same-sex marriage, forming the religious right wing. Sixth party system from 1976 to 2000. In 1980, the Republican candidate Ronald Reagan defeated the incumbent Democrat President Jimmy Carter. The promise of free trade, tax cuts, defeat of communism, and re-establishing moral values appealed to the rural and lower and middle class whites, socially conservative immigrants, blue-collar workers, and small business owners. Though the Republicans won the election, they were unable to gain complete control of the Congress. They gained complete control in 1994 under the leadership of Newt Gingrich. Contract with America, a feat which had not been possible since Eisenhower administration. During the same period, the Democratic Party were made up of African Americans, Latinos, and white urban progressives, high educated professionals, trade unionists, and dominated the urban areas. With the end of the second term of President Reagan in 1988, the incumbent Vice President George H.W. Bush of the Republican Party won the election on his endorsement of Pledge of Allegiance, prayer in schools, capital punishment, gun rights, and no to raising taxes. The Democrats, on the other hand, controlled both the houses of Congress. When Bill Clinton was elected as the president in 1993, he focused on reducing the federal deficit, emphasized on welfare reform, implemented the North American Free Trade Agreement, increased funds for education and early childhood programs, and engaged in peace efforts in the Middle East and intervention in the Balkans. The Democrats had majority in both houses from 1993 to 1994 and from 1995 to 2000. The Republicans had the majority in both houses. Seventh party system from 2002 to present. The Republicans achieved unprecedented victory in 2002 presidential election when George W. Bush won the election. The Republicans controlled the executive, legislature, and majority of governorships and state legislatures. This type of majority the Republican Party had not enjoyed since 1988. This government focused on tax cuts, increased accountability in education, introduced tax rebates, and increased government spending to combat recession, prescription drug coverage for elders, and focused on domestic energy production and energy independence. After the completion of 2 terms by George W. Bush, the Democrat candidate Obama won the presidential election in 2009. His administration enacted Affordable Care Act, addressed the problems faced during Great Recession, focused on job creation and infrastructure investment, financial regulation reforms to prevent financial meltdown, and operations against Osama bin Laden. In the first 2 years, from 2009 to 2011, the Democrats held the majority in both houses. From 2011 to 2015, the Republicans controlled the House. And from 2015 to 2017, the Republicans controlled both houses. After completion of 2 terms by Obama, there was hope that the Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton would win the presidential election. But Donald Trump won the presidential election in 2017. His administration implemented tax cuts, imposed tariffs on China, strict immigration policies, travel ban from Muslim countries, and building wall along US-Mexico border. The administration was criticized for downplaying the severity of COVID-19 and also delays in response to COVID-19. The Republican Party held the majority in both houses from 2017 to 2019, and from 2018 onwards, Democrats gained control of the House and the Republicans continued their domination in the Senate. In the 21st century, Democrats and Republicans had different ideologies, priorities, and support. First, views. Democrats are liberal while the Republicans are conservative. Second, popularity. Democrats dominate in large cities while the Republicans are popular in rural areas. Third, support from region. In the Northeast, some areas of Midwest, South Atlanta and New Orleans, and West California and Washington lean towards Democrats, while in the Midwest, rural parts, almost entire South, and parts of the Rocky Mountain states lean towards Republican. Fourth, government spending. Democrats support larger government role and federal spending programs in economic issues, while the Republicans support smaller government role and reduce spending in the form of block grants to the states. Fifth, taxes. Democrats favor progressive tax to finance governments, which helps low-income groups, while the Republicans support broad-based tax to stimulate economic growth and encourage investment. Sixth, social justice and equality. Democrats focus on civil rights, gender equality, and supports abortion and LGBTQIA+ rights, favors same-sex unions and gay rights, while the Republicans are against abortion and LGBTQIA+ rights. Seventh, immigration. Democrats advocate for less strict immigration laws and pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, while Republicans stand for sealing the border to stop migrant invasion and to deport illegal migrants. Eighth, military funding. The Democrats reduce military funding, advocate for a balanced approach. They advocate for increased funding for veteran services, including health care, mental health support, and housing assistance, while Republicans support higher military spending to ensure military readiness. They support veterans funding but focus on efficiency and reducing waste within the Department of Veteran Affairs and advocate for private providers for health care. Ninth, healthcare. The Democrats support healthcare through programs like the Affordable Care Act by federal funding, regulating drug prices, and reducing overall health care costs, support for food stamps, and expanding Medicaid in states that have not implemented it. The Republicans favor market-based approach which promotes competition among private insurers to lower costs. They encourage states to manage their own healthcare systems, support health saving accounts to give individuals more control over their health spending. Both parties support improving prescription drug benefits. 10th, education. The Democrats favor federal funding for public schools, emphasize equal access to quality education, support diverse curriculum, supports increase in salaries for teachers as well as reducing classroom sizes, and favors holistic assessments of student learning, while the Republicans advocate for school choice, charter schools and voucher programs, reduction in federal funding, curriculum promoting patriotism and American exceptionalism, support for merit-based pay for teachers, emphasize parental control over education, and standardized testing as a measure of educational success and accountability. 11th, Social Security. The Democrats advocate for expanding Social Security benefits to support retirees, protect Social Security from cuts so that it is a safety net for seniors and vulnerable populations, advocates for cost of living adjustments to keep pace with inflation and rising living costs, while Republicans aim at reforming Social Security to ensure sustainability, supports reduction in government spending which may lead to cuts in Social Security, emphasizes the need to address funding shortfalls to maintain the program for future generation. 12th, minimum wage. The Democrats advocate for raising the federal minimum wage. This will help stimulate the economy by boosting consumer spending, emphasizes on living wage to reduce poverty and support workers' basic needs, and supports reducing wage disparities and promoting fair pay for all workers, while the Republicans oppose increase to the federal minimum wage as it may lead to job losses and harm small businesses, advocates for state and local control over minimum wage laws, and favors market dictate wages rather than government mandates on the ground that competition will lead to fair compensation. 13th, environment. The Democrats emphasize on addressing climate change through regulatory measures, renewable energy investments, and international agreements. To protect public lands and endangered species, as well as promotion of sustainable practices and green technologies. The Republicans focus on balancing environmental regulations with economic growth, supports deregulation, state-level management of environmental issues, and advocates energy independence through the use of domestic fossil fuels. 14th, energy. The Democrats support to renewable energy sources like wind, solar, hydroelectric power, advocates for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, incentives for businesses and homeowners to reduce energy consumption, support for stricter regulation on fossil fuel extraction and use, while the Republicans support the continued use of fossil fuels, deregulating the energy sector to promote free market solutions and reduce burdens on energy producers, and favor state and local management of energy resources. 15th, manufacturing. The Democrats support workers' rights, higher wages, benefits and improved working conditions, promote investments in clean energy and sustainable practices, advocates for government programs and incentives to support domestic manufacturing in high technology and innovative sectors, while the Republicans emphasize deregulation, supports free trade for competition and innovation in manufacturing, encourage businesses to invest in domestic manufacturing and create jobs, favor tough trade policies to protect American jobs and support traditional manufacturing sectors like automotive and steel.